Hi there. Welcome to the Game Master platform. I'm excited to have you here. I'm going to give you a quick overview of getting started with your first session. So in this example, I've gone to the Game Master platform marketplace. I've downloaded a free campaign. In this instance, it's the free campaign for Towers of Astor Act 1. What I'm sharing here on the screen is that information. So the first thing I do when I download a new campaign is I come into this edit campaign and I review it. I look at what's the summary. As a GM, I read through the overview to get a sense of what's going on. I look at the acts, what were the hooks, and this is really getting into the mind of the creator of how did they want to start the campaign. I open up this acts section because an act is like a chapter of your book or of a campaign. It's the session that you're going to run. So in this case, I've come in and I've added my 8 encounters and a one random encounter. Since I'm going to run this as a one shot, I have to do a little bit of railroading to get this going. So we're going to start on Riverbend and we're going to get the players, on it. It's basically a chase where they need to deliver Farron to Lexa by the end of the session. Now, these may not occur necessarily in this order. This is how I think as a GM it might occur, but based on how the players, what they do, these can come in any order. So I think through that. I look at the map and I say, okay, here's Riverbend. And the players actually have 3 ways to get to Steens. They have the yellow route, the red route, and the blue route. Red is what I am going to be focused on since I only have, one session. I don't have time. Like the blue route can take probably 2 to 3 sessions. The yellow route is very dangerous and it might take a couple sessions as well. The video will give you a quick overview. And then lastly, the DM notes. This is the story and all the guts that you need as a GM. And here I provided links to the encounters as well as the one shot order that I am choosing to run. Doesn't mean you need to do it this way. This is just how, I'm thinking about this campaign. So now I've downloaded Towers of Astor. I've familiarize myself with what is the campaign and how do I need to get there. Now I pivot into the encounters and I'm going to go encounter by encounter and familiarize myself with these encounters. So for example, I would go to encounter 1. I read a description of the encounter. I see the GM notes here. I notice that we have maps that are laid out for the GM. I see this in encounter 1 is here in Riverbend. I have the order you are here. So potentially the next one is the Scout of the Shadows. I see that in the DM notes, I have detailed overview of this encounter. And then I've added all the different bad guys, the NPCs and foes that I have, as well as interesting items like stalls and maps. So I take the time to review this encounter. Now, what's really cool, and I've already done this, but what you can do is whether you're on, and I'll go back to the campaign. So when you're on a campaign, notice you get these buttons. You can write a campaign overview, write a campaign summary, generate campaign ideas, like if you're creating. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just simply come in and I'll create a new chat and I'll say, tell me about this campaign. So then what it will do is it will read the campaign and it will give me a nice little summary of this campaign. It'll tell me about the settings, key locations, factions, the different all about the campaign, which is nice. Now when I come to the first encounter, this encounter has notes and it has all the details. But notice these buttons change. So now I can tell it, hey, just read the encounter for me. And the AI will read the encounter and it will come back. It'll say ready to chat. Now you just trained the AI on the campaign and on this encounter. So what's powerful is now you can tell it for this encounter, generate for me a unique market stall with its owner and wares. Now it will go through and it will do that. It knows the context of your encounter, the campaign, and it will spit out, an enchanted emissary. It'll go through the details. And then it'll give you the name, it'll give you the wares, those type of things. What's really powerful, and I've done this as an example, is here's encounter one. I've saved it. You can edit this and you can save this as whatever you want to call it. So I can say new where or yeah, new stall, and I'll just save this. So that way, as a GM, I am working on like the details of the overview, and then I'm chatting with my AI assistant to go deeper. And I can flesh out my NPCs this way. I can do all kinds of interesting things. So now I've taken the time, I've reviewed the overall campaign, I've gone through each encounter. I understand like where the encounters are and what's going to happen in them. So there's quite a few encounters on here. Now I go to PCs and I review the PC's backgrounds. Understand how do they fit into this overall story, and understand what I need to like who might be a good fit for this character based on how they want to play. Once I've done that for all my player characters, I now come to sessions. And the session is basically the object where I can schedule my first session. And on my first session, I pick my date, I pick my time. So I'll put it here. I pick my first act and I pick my starting encounter. That tells the session where to begin. Then I have the ability to add my non-player character or my player characters. Once I assign player characters to a person, I can add them to my session. These player characters have not been assigned yet, so they're not showing up here. That's okay. The next thing I do is I pull in important assets that I need to have at my fingertips for my GM session. So what I did is I basically went to items and I pulled in important maps. So if I need a map of Steens, the town, I'll pull it in because I'll want to have it at my fingertips. The next thing I do is I come in and I add any encounter that I think I might be playing. So I wanted to add one more random encounter here. So now I have the beginning encounter, the order which it might play out, as well as a couple of random encounters if I have time to throw in. The next thing I do is I go into an overview. I write down from this is for me the GM planning this session. What do I want to accomplish from a story arc, a background, just kind of a high level overview that I want to make sure the highlights I want to hit. Strong start. Since we're starting with encounter one in this instance, encounter one is an ambush start, so I just put ambush at the marketplace. But if I was playing in a campaign where I had multiple sessions, multiple, over and over and over again, I will always think about how do I want to start this campaign? What is my opening scene? So I will oftentimes describe that here. Lastly, rule of cool. Rule of cool is simply about how do I ensure I'm building encounters and scenarios that get my players excited. So I know who is playing the different characters, and I know certain ones really like battle, other ones like mystery, other ones like to solve puzzles, or they like history and lore. I will make sure every time I run a session, I think about each player from their perspective because the end goal is for the players. It's to make them, really enjoy what you're doing. Lastly, for a session, I'll put in a summary. Right now, what this is simply an overview of the campaign because the session hasn't run yet. Once I run the session, I will use the AI and I'll just type in here. I'll say, here's everything that happened in this session. Give me a summary, and it'll write a summary for me, and I'll put it in there. This is really important if you have ongoing campaigns, especially if there's a little bit of time between them where people can review what happened the previous sessions. All these summary notes will be made available to your players. So now that I've taken the time to go through and familiarize myself with the campaign, and I've scheduled a start date, I can now go play it. This is where things get really interesting. because here it opens up on the encounter that you're starting with. This new kind of digital GM screen will have an image. And if I click on this image, notice there's a little eyeball. You can click on that eyeball, it will share it with the players. So that way it brings them into this encounter. Here, if there's a bad guy, notice this eyeball here as well. This bad guy, you can share it and it will show up on the player's view. So you can really start to storytell with images with your encounters. Um, with the encounters as well, there's these tabs. So I'm on this first encounter. I don't have PCs here because I haven't assigned any to that session. Once I do, they'll show up here. These are all the NPCs, as well as here's Farron, um, the NPC that we need to deliver. So over here on the right, notice you'll have rules. If I picked a rule, all of your custom rules would be in here. Whatever D&D rules that you want, you can put them in there on the campaign. Here's the AI assistant. Notice here's the stall I had. Here's the one around the encounter one. So as I work through all my different encounters, I save them off so I can just pivot and keep all my thoughts and my notes right here at my fingertips. This is an initiative tracker. Once I start a session, I can figure out initiative order and I can manage that. So now here across the bottom, we have these tabs. I want to start with the encounter tab because for this encounter, you'll see you have all the information that you configured. Your overview, you have your maps, there's everything. You have your DM notes, and you have your assets associated to this encounter. Here are the stalls. So as a GM, I have all the stalls at my fingertips so I can role play it. I have maps. And these maps, I can click the eyeball and share it with the players. I have the description of them for me. I can even assign these assets by clicking the person and assign it to a player into their inventory. So this is a powerful overview of the encounter. The session is everything that we talked about. What's the overview? What's the asset? Strong start, rule of tool, the summary, those type of things. Whisper is once you've started this session, you can chat between the group or the individuals, and it will store all of that information here for each and every session. So you can go back as a GM or as a player and reflect on all conversations that you've had leading up to this moment in time. Lastly, there's this music. Here in the music, you as a GM, you can play locally, whatever you want, and you can just by clicking play all, or you can pick one. There will be more available in the future. But in any event, that's how I get up and running. This is basically a digital GM screen where I have access to all my NPCs. I can pivot through all my encounters. I have AI at my fingertips. I have my session notes, my encounter notes, as well as a chatbot, all right here. And this is how I will run my sessions. And anyways, I hope you enjoy this and you find this useful. And I'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you.